Nagbabalik po ang The Deep Probe, the SMNI Presidential Candidates Interview. We're down to our last candidate. Ito na po ang huling kandidato na haharap sa ating panelists sa araw na ito.
Sa gitna ng samot-saring isyong ibinabato laban sa kanyang pamilya, nananatiling matibay at may paninindigan para sa bayan. Bitbit ang mga pangakong pagbabago para sa ikabuunlad ng bansa. Trabaho para sa mga Pilipino, murang kuryente, industrialisasyon, kalidad na edukasyon, reforma sa iba't ibang sektor, at pagkakaisa ng sambayanang Pilipino ang sentro ng kanyang kampanya.
Bilang Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas, sinabi ko na ako'y tatakbo dahil ang aking layunin, ang aking dating bansa ay magkaisa muli kung saan pagandahin po natin ang ating minamahal na bansang Pilipinas. Sama-sama po tayong papamuli.
Tumatakbong Pangulo mula sa Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr.
Start the program. Everyone, can we ask everyone to please sit down so we can start the program? Thank you for your cooperation. Thank you. Senator Marcos, you have the floor, and the panelists will be asking you questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Marcos?
Good evening, ma'am.
If this were, I've never been to a campaign rally, but if this looks like it, and maybe multiplied so many times over, I can imagine what you're feeling is like euphoria, isn't it? Because we're not even involved and we are feeling euphoric here.
It's very encouraging, ma'am. That's true.
Okay, this is the second time we are going through this. This time it will be banter, nothing aggressive nor belligerent. You have the thickest portfolio here. I counted more than 50 pages which were submitted to the network and which were given to us.
Madaming,
So, I have 1,000 questions, but since I have 3 other colleagues here, maybe I'll ask something which is right in my alley, and I think I have asked this also in my post in the social media. And whose is Ukraine, assuming that you have a peace agreement within the next 2 weeks, which is more likely, do you see a new political and economic order, but this time you have other political actors like Moscow, Beijing, and even Tehran?
Yes.
What's your take on that?
There will be a new world order. Because I have, I think, watching Ukraine and seeing the developments, and which are not exactly going the way of the President Putin would have wanted it to. I suspect there will be domestic implications to whatever the peace agreement is going to be. I hope you are right, man, that it will be done in 2 weeks, because we are the entire world is suffering. But there will be a very big change, because the how do you say, the idea, I think some of the analysts have said, I don't know if you agree with this, is that President Putin is trying to reconstruct or recreate the Soviet Union under another name. So perhaps this was his move. Should he weaken as a political figure in his own country, in Russia, then certainly that policy of trying to gain territory through whatever means, as he says, because to provide for him a buffer to NATO, whatever the reason might truly be. I think that will have to be re-studied by whoever will be most dominant in Russian domestic politics after Putin. So yes, I believe there will be a new world order, and I think I am certain that Tehran and Beijing are watching very, very closely what will happen to Ukraine. There will be a geopolitical balance of power. It also depends on what the reaction of the EU and the United States will be. I think the United States we can predict fairly accurately. EU is in a more difficult spot simply because they are highly dependent for their energy to Russia, and how they will balance that. I know that the President Biden has just signed with the EU a deal to supply from the United States and from other countries 15 billion tons of gas, which will cover some of the needs of the EU. But again, that's not something that can instantly be made, to instantly be applied. There will be a transition period because it is a very large economic infrastructure that has been developed for Europe to take advantage of the gas supplies out of Russia. These are all terribly large forces, inevitably will change them.
Yeah, but it seems like you have a more dire scenario, future scenario in mind. But what I have used really is from a content analytical perspective, using events data analysis, meaning I'm paying attention to the verbs being used by the negotiators. And this is not Pollyannish, by the way, Mr. Marcos. It's just that I feel that Putin will not allow the conflict to spill over. It will encapsulate within the Ukraine, a conflict area. And that, yes, I still believe that within the next 2 weeks you have a peace agreement.
I sincerely hope so, because misunderstandings, mistakes can occur. With Poland being right there on the border of Ukraine, we already have had reports of missiles that mistakenly flew into Poland, and these are the kind of things that we have to be very careful about. I think maybe that is one thing that they can agree upon, Russia and the West, as we have referred to it often.
Marcos, earlier, I don't know if you were around already when I asked questions about the projected state visit of Vladimir Putin here in the Philippines, because the Duterte administration has only so many more breaths to take before the end of their regime, of their tenure. When you become president, will he honor that invitation that Duterte had given to him? to do a state visit? Not just a visit, a state visit.
Well, certainly. Why not? We have diplomatic relations with Moscow. We should continue to honor that agreement that we have with Russia, and we must continue to again cultivate the relationships that are beneficial to the country. And it's not, as long as we make our position very clear that self-determination is an important principle as far as the Philippines is concerned, and in that context, then we can still speak on many other subjects with Russia.
Yeah, so that means you are not telegraphing something to the United States of America by welcoming Vladimir Putin in a state visit.
It need not be Russia or Vladimir Putin, any country. I think that would like to come and visit and would feel that there is something beneficial to be gained by furthering, strengthening relationships between our two countries is something that we should always be open to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Marcos.
Good evening.
Ang tanong ko po ay ito, ang nabanggit niyo po ang phrase na New World Order na sa tingin niyo ay maaaring mangyari pagkatapos ng peace treaty between Ukraine and Russia, and you see that the world will be restructured around a new framework or a new geopolitical order. So my question is this, I hope that you realize the burden or the special task that you have as a future chief architect of our foreign policy, because in the past drawing of world orders, the Philippines never played a role in determining its position in that world order. For example, between the wars of Spain and the United States, it's the United States that defined our position in that new world order. When the United Nations was instituted after post-World War II, we were still at the coattails of the United States. But now we are an independent country. So my question is, when this new world order that you think could happen after a peace treaty gets concluded between Ukraine and Russia, how will you position our country in this new geopolitical order?
It very clearly will depend on what the exit strategy will be for the West, for EU, and for Putin in the peace agreement that we hope they will sign. What the nature of that agreement will be. Will it be status quo? The forces that are in Ukraine, the Russian forces and Belarusian forces that are already in Ukraine, will they just stay where they are, status quo? Will they be told to withdraw? I only say that because it is very important to Putin's position domestically. He is in a very precarious place because it has not gone according to plan. I suspect that he was hoping that it would be a similar situation as it was in Crimea, where they pretty much just walked in with very little resistance. But then they prepared Crimea for a long time. They were helping the rebel groups, the Russian-speaking groups, and they were developing them. And they built a corridor on the east side of Crimea, within which the Russians could cross the border very easily. That hasn't been the case in Ukraine. And so, depending on how it is viewed, the peace treaty that we hope will come, it depends on how it is viewed by the local domestic political scenarios in Russia itself. That, whatever the reaction will be to Putin, will fix one of the variables in the geopolitical new world order. So we still have to wait to see what happens. I'm sure China is waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen. Yes, Tehran, I'm sure, as the professor mentioned, is clearly a player in this regard, and in the Middle East. Now, so far, it has not affected the Middle East in any way so far. But maybe if it works out for Russia, if it works out for Vladimir Putin, China might be emboldened to make their own moves. Tehran might be emboldened to make their own moves. On the other hand, if it is very much a a rejection of the idea of Putin of taking over a country, then perhaps that will also influence their thinking as to what can and cannot be done for their own interests. So yes, I don't think we can predict very closely because we cannot. I hope to be as optimistic as the professor, but I don't see it happening in 2 weeks, to be perfectly honest. I hope it is. I hope it does, because the economic effects on every single person in the world has been enormous, and it is going to be enormous for a good long while. It's not going to go away anytime soon.
Sir, since we have a mutual defense treaty with the United States, that would affect, I'm sure that would play a role in how, our country would position ourselves in this new geopolitical world order. So my question is, to what extent will you allow the United States influence your actual decision making in how you're going to craft the future foreign policy of the Philippines when that new world order has already taken shape?
Well, we have a very special relationship with the United States, and it's something that we have had and developed over 100 years, starting from being essentially a colony to a very strong partner here in this, especially in this part of the world, in the region. And that, I think, has been a good thing for both countries, both for the United States and for the Philippines. And that I think we can still depend on that. But the scenario that you spoke about, where we historically have always been with the United States, is still, I think, a carryover, a hangover of the Cold War, and we discussed it a little bit the last time. And I don't think the geopolitics of today are the same. And we now have to tread that very fine line to make sure that it's the Philippines, it's the Philippine interests that are the primacy of Philippine interests in anything. Now, in geopolitics, especially, we have another superpower 600 kilometers from our coastline, China. That puts again the Philippines in quite a precarious position. We're lucky because we're important geopolitically, even just we're strategically. We are unlucky because we are important geopolitically, and we've become a bit of a hot potato when it comes to that. So we definitely have to consider what is best always for the Philippines. And how do we achieve that? With our existing partnerships, alliances, as they stand now, with what will be a new world order. Will it be a very big change? Will it be a small, slight change? Will it be a big change for Russia and a small change for everybody else? There are many moving parts to this thing, and it's not something that is easily definable. But I think once the peace agreement is made, we will study it very, very closely, and we will ask our best experts to determine what is the effect in these other countries. What is the effect to Tehran, to Iran? What's the effect? How does it change their thinking in Beijing? How does it change the thinking in Washington, D.C.? These are the big players. These are the people we have to deal with. So yes, it's not. I wish I could give you a categorical answer, but until we know exactly what that peace treaty will contain, it's very difficult. And to know what will happen after that in Russia. How will the power structure change? Will Putin be removed? Will he still maintain his position? All of these things are going to play a part in what it will look like after that peace agreement.
Senator, good evening. With this as a backdrop, the discussion with Russia, Ukraine, I was wondering if you can pivot to domestic concerns, particularly your energy policy.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the conflict is being felt worldwide, and among the things that we are seeing are sky-high fuel prices. But how would you address this? What would be your policies, particularly with energy security, going beyond this issue?
In the past week or so, since the war in Ukraine began, I have been espousing a policy of subsidizing all oil imports. because the idea is that yes, transport is the first sector that's going to be affected, but everyone will be affected, and therefore if we're to support everyone, we have to subsidize all oil imports, in my view. However, I have been crunching the numbers. We can't do it. We cannot afford